Welcome to the Action Network studio in New York City. I'm Maria Marino, and this is Green Dot Daily. We're live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Speaking of YouTube, we asked yesterday in the chat which team you wanted to hear about most in terms of market news and reaction. Eagles were the winner, so we'll get a pulse on them from Patrick Everson. We'll also talk college football and WNBA props. But we start with baseball, and this is how the ALCS and NLCS are shaping up so far. Both series have been somewhat lopsided. Rangers and Phillies both up 2-0, but the biggest disparity has been the Phillies' ERA of 1 compared to 8.44 for the Diamondbacks. Philly has outscored Arizona 15-3. Let's say hello to our MLB expert, Sean Zerillo. So I want to start with how you're betting the game tonight, which is Astros-Rangers Game 3 just after 8 Eastern.
Targeting some player props all related to pitcher usage. On the Texas side, Max Scherzer coming back after more than a month on the shelf. Had a shoulder strain, dealt with a neck injury earlier in the year, but has been banged up through much of the season. Going to give it a go tonight. Apparently was throwing a bullpen during the divisional series last week in the low 90s. He sat closer to 94 miles an hour this year. Even if he got his velocity up another tick from 90, 91, he's still going to be at less than 100% effectiveness. And maybe the command is a little bit off too, as I said, after a month on the shelf. Also don't expect him to be fully stretched out and to go particularly deep into the game. So probably 60 to 70 pitches, 1 time, 2 times through the lineup at most for Max Scherzer tonight. I both like his under 4.5 strikeouts and under 12.5 outs props for tonight. Going to be more difficult to get strikeouts if he's not going to be at his peak velocity, but also just not going to have as many opportunities if he's only seeing the lineup twice. So the unders on Max Scherzer tonight, I think the way to go. Maybe the unders also on, walks allowed, things like that, stuff that normally correlate to him performing poorly, but actually are more correlated to just him getting out of the game quicker. On the other end of the matchup, Christian Javier, I like him to go over his props tonight, particularly over 12.5 outs recorded and over 1.5 walks recorded. In regard to the walks, Texas actually walked or chased pitches outside of the zone less frequently than any other team once Evan Carter arrived in their lineup in early September, and he has really been the driving force of their offense this postseason. So not going to chase pitches, not going to chase that slider from Javier outside of the zone. I think Texas can rack up walks tonight, but we also saw Dusty Baker put a lot of trust in Javier in that divisional round in their game against the Twins. They were up 5-0, I believe. But in the 5th inning of Javier's start, walked the bases loaded, 1 out, ended up striking out 2 guys, including a red-hot Royce Lewis, to get out of the inning. So I think Dusty Baker has a lot of trust in Christian Javier, does not script games with him, and I think he's going to let him go pretty deep into this game as you have 3 consecutive games coming up on 3 consecutive days. Can't really dive into your bullpen too early. So overs on Javier tonight, unders on Max Scherzer, pitching props related to pitcher usage.
Okay, so we have your strategy with the props, but I do want to get a quick opinion from you on the side, only because, some people might see this as a buy low spot for Houston. How do you see it?
Yeah, I projected Houston about plus 114 in this game, so no bet for me on this side. If you want to attack Houston in terms of a series bet, I projected them about 20%, so plus 400 implied. Would want plus 450 or better if I was going to jump in, even plus 425 or better. And you're not really going to get that number out there. The best I saw available was about plus 400. But I think an alternative approach, if you want to bet Houston to win the series, bet them to win in Game 7 or bet them to win 4-3 exactly in this series at closer to plus 600. If they come back, I actually expect them to have a pitching advantage in Game 7. As I just discussed with Max Scherzer probably being less than 100%, he would probably be lined up to face Christian Javier in a Game 7. And if that game's going to be at home for Houston, I project them closer to 56 or 57% in that matchup. So would love to ride a plus 600 ticket into a potential Game 7 with Houston, but don't necessarily think it's going to get there. But if I was going to make a bet at this point, that would be the approach.
Got it. All right, let's turn our attention to the series continuing tomorrow. Phillies up 2-0 in the NLCS. How are you approaching that series?
Yeah, so I make Philly about minus 620, minus 625 to win that series. As of now, typically I'd want about plus 750 to bet Arizona, but I do have Phillies futures, including minus 1.5 games in this series and also their World Series odds. So not interested in jumping in on Arizona, but that would be my price target. However, this is the one spot that I do want to bet Arizona in this series. I project Philly as a favorite in 6 out of the 7 games. The one game I do not is game 3, assuming Brandon Pfaadt is going to be going against Ranger Suarez. Project Arizona closer to minus 112 in this matchup, closer to minus 120 for the first 5 innings. So about minus 110 would be my first half price target, about minus 104, minus 105 over the full game. Just project them as slight favorites in this matchup. I think we've seen all the public money pouring in on Philly, who does look like a lock to make the World Series at this point. But I think Arizona can maybe extend the series, make it just a little bit more competitive than it has been through these first 2 games. And I think we're getting a decent price on them here at home in a game where I make them slight favorites. So Arizona plus money, plus 115, plus 120, the highest number out there. Just think you're getting a little bit of an overinflated price based on how the series has played out thus far.
Well, I'm glad we got your take on that game 3 since you won't be with us tomorrow. But Sean Zerillo, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Over to the NFL. Check out the latest odds to win the NFC via FanDuel. 49ers lead the pack at plus 185, followed by the Eagles at plus 350, Cowboys at plus 500, and the Lions at plus 600. Then odds jump up to plus 2,000 for the Seahawks. Senior reporter for Vegas Insider Patrick Everson joins us now. Eagles coming off a surprising loss to the Jets. Has there been any overreaction to this within the betting market?
I don't think it's happened yet, Maria. Not to say that it won't, but not overreaction. And I was looking over some numbers, some information that BetMGM sent this week as far as looking ahead to futures odds. Obviously, we've got a big game Sunday night, which we'll get to. But futures odds, the Eagles are still number 1 in ticket count at BetMGM to win the Super Bowl. Really close between the top 4, 5, 6 teams. And they're number 4 in money. And again, that's a category. Money and bet on the Super Bowl, that's pretty close between the top 4, 5, 6 teams. So not much layoff of the Eagles yet. There's not a big overreaction. I don't think there's going to be, at this point, I'm not seeing a huge overreaction this week either.
Fair enough. Well, as you mentioned, Eagles will be tested again Sunday night, hosting the Dolphins. Both teams 5-1. How's the market looking for that game, taking into account some of those injuries in Philly?
Right. I talked with Casey Degnan. He's just a little bit ago, senior risk supervisor for the Superbook here in Las Vegas. And what he noted is it's fair to say the Eagles' defensive backfield injuries, they've got kind of cluster injury situation going there right now. He said that impacts the game. It definitely impacts this spot for the Eagles, especially against, as we all know, a very high-powered Dolphins offense. So that line, you know, we saw a little bit earlier in the week, maybe a little bit of a regression or a little bit of a move toward the Dolphins. It's kind of slid back out a little bit toward the Eagles. So he said that's certainly impacting things a little bit. There was, some thoughts about the Eagles signing of Julio Jones, whether that might play a role this week. Does that help them at all? And what Casey said, at this point, Julio Jones isn't moving the needle. He said just basically at this point of his career, he's not a needle mover week to week, or as we just discussed a moment ago, in the futures markets.
Alrighty, let's talk about the next NFL game we have to look forward to. So we got Jaguars, Saints Thursday night. How is the market adjusted to updates on Trevor Lawrence?
Well, it's been a little bit back and forth here. There were some books, Maria, that on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, opened this game around Pick'em, and then you saw it pretty quickly sprint out to Saints -3 on, maybe probably a combination of bettors and odds makers thinking that perhaps Trevor Lawrence was not going to play in this Thursday night game. A short week, quick turnaround time for his bruised knee or whatever the actual injury is, something to deal with his knee. But now it's coming back toward the Jaguars with Lawrence indicating that he's optimistic that he's going to play. And I just literally in the last few minutes got some information from Zachary Lucas at TwinSpire Sportsbook. He said with this line going back toward, they opened at 3. They opened a little bit later, went with Saints -3. Now they're down to Saints -1. And he said the public definitely likes Miami. He said not really a surprise that there's a little bit more tickets and money running towards Miami with oh Jesus, holy cow, Maria. I'm looking at Miami notes and talking about the Jaguars. Holy cow. It only took me about 15 seconds to realize that there. I apologize.
No worries.
So holy moly. The perils of live. So again, getting back to the Saints open at Pick'em at some books. TwinSpires opens -3. Lawrence expresses optimism that he's going to play, goes back to -1. And it's actually two-way action at the moment with a lean toward Jacksonville. Again, apologies there, folks. But
I think you
know,
had
again,
I think you had the info correct. I think you just accidentally said Miami at one point.
Exactly. I
Instead of
inserted Miami in there. But yeah, it's two-way play with a lean toward the road dog Jacksonville, Murray. And again, my apologies. 52% of spread tickets, 58% of spread money on the Jags. And again, it's midweek, but this is an early game. We've only got, a day plus to go here. He said it is a mix of sharp and public play coming in on Jacksonville that moved that from Saints -3 to Saints -1.
Right. So essentially moving back toward a pick'em sort of scenario like it was when it opened, considering that Lawrence could be a go. And it should be a close game. Jags looking for their 5th win on the season. Saints trying to get above 500. Patrick Everson, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
To college football, check out where championship odds have moved from last week to this week. Georgia still the odds leader at +275, a slight jump from last week. Michigan is at +300, which is shorter than last week, while Ohio State has stayed steady at +900. As we bring in our college football experts, Collin Wilson and Brett McMurphy. Now, both of you have Georgia at the top of your respective rankings, but tight end Brock Bowers is now out because of ankle surgery. Collin, how does that affect your outlook on the Bulldogs the rest of the year?
I know I'm in the minority, but 0. I mean, it doesn't change the power rating. It doesn't change my outlook for Georgia. And the reason is because they're so loaded at all of the other positions. Now, this doesn't affect who's playing on the outside from Ra Thomas or Dominic Lovett, but on the inside, they just got Ladd McConkey back. He was a huge piece of the national championship team last year. He's going to get all the crossers. He's going to be in the slot. It just makes Georgia more of a downfield passing unit than short passing, slants, crossers, tight end play action. That stuff is gone without Bowers. When you look at Georgia's numbers, 12 personnel, which is 2 tight end sets, they're pretty good at success rate. They're not real explosive, but in 11 in a single tight end set, they're extremely explosive and have a better success rate. And I expect this Georgia offense to be more potent.
Okay, so Collin, you've admitted you're in the minority there, but Brett, does that mean that you disagree?
Oh, look, this is a minority report. Cue Tom Cruise. I agree with Collin. I mean, it's a big loss, make no mistake. But again, it's a tight end. And as great as Bowers is, it doesn't decimate Georgia. They still have more talent than 99% of the teams on the face of the planet, at least in the college ranks. It's very simple for Georgia, the same as it's always been. They just have to get to the SEC title game, and then they should have a path to the college football playoff. They haven't played anybody up to this point, but the back half of the schedule, they will actually play some ranked teams. Tennessee, Ole Miss, they've got Florida in a couple of weeks in Jacksonville. Florida's not ranked, but the world's largest cocktail party always has a few surprises. So Georgia's going to be fine. As far as how you're going to power rate them, I would see, like Collin said, no dip or maybe only a slight dip, but the Bulldogs are going to be fine.
Okay, I like it. A little minority report. Not too bad. Let's move on to 7-ranked Penn State at number 3 Ohio State, which is Saturday at noon Eastern. Obviously a big game. Brett, is this essentially an elimination game for either team?
Not necessarily, Maria, but the loser would have to win out to be able to make the college football playoff, which would mean you'd have to lose this game and then win out and get back to the Big Ten title game. You've got Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. All 3 teams will play each other in a round robin. So we'll have to see how that ends up. But certainly for Penn State, a lot of people think they're the best team in the Big Ten. This is their chance to prove it. I think the line has dropped down since it opened up. But you look at Penn State's defense. They lead the nation in fewest yards per game and in fewest yards per play. And this will be a big test. I think Ohio State's offense has not been what a lot of people expected. And certainly if Penn State wins this game on the road, then they would, have the upper hand at least until they play Michigan down the road.
Collin, how are you handicapping this game?
I think this is going to fall within how the series has always fallen. It's been a slow starting game. No first quarter has gone over 10 points since 2017. You have to kick out the 2020 pandemic season. That didn't count. But this should be a first half under all the way because there's no explosiveness with this Penn State offense whatsoever. Like Brett said, they have the best defense in the nation, but Ohio State isn't too far behind from a defensive perspective. So I expect both offenses to struggle, just take light jabs. Then some haymakers will probably come out in the second half like it did last year. There was, I don't know, 45 points, 35 points in the fourth quarter alone last year. So first half under, the number should be 3, not 4.5. So I like Penn State overall.
All right, fair enough. Collin, what about any picks for tonight or the weekend ahead that you're also looking at?
Yeah, let's stay in this beautiful conference that is Conference USA midweek action. It's definitely been a lot of fun and a lot of swings. Let's stay with New Mexico State on the road as a favorite. It's gross, but we're going to take it at -3. It's about the last point that I would buy this at. There's just too many rushing advantages for Diego Pavia, the quarterback for New Mexico State, against a UTEP team who's going to be struggling on offense on their own. They have their backup quarterback going who can still hit explosives, but they are not methodical whatsoever. Go ahead and look at New Mexico State swallowing the points.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you stopping by Green Dot Daily. Once again, Brent McMurphy and Collin Wilson. We'll see you again next time. To WNBA Finals, here's how prices have shifted throughout the series. Aces were favored going in, then massively favored after executing blowouts in the first 2 games. Then following a Liberty win in Game 3 and ahead of tonight's Game 4, odds of New York forcing a Game 5 and winning it all have narrowed significantly. With that, we welcome in Action Network writer Bryan Fonseca. Welcome to the wonderful world of Green Dot Daily. I've had you on our podcast Buckets, but this is the first time on GDD. So let me ask you this. New York's title odds now at +200 or so. They would lose home court advantage in a potential Game 5, but would you take that bet?
Well, I think if you're backing the Liberty, you kind of have to. And you and I both bet the Liberty before this started. And I'm standing strong because of the injury news with Chelsea Gray and Kia Stokes. I think that you just have to take the price because in the event that Game 4 is a blowout in Liberty's favor and they cover, which is something that we could probably touch on, then I think that you kind of have to take this because that number, I'm not sure, even on the road in Game 5, how much more favorable is going to be because the Liberty are going to have the momentum on their side. And if it's a game where they're firing on all cylinders and it's another double-digit game, and I have no reason to think it won't be because every single game these two have played has resulted in double digits except for one, and that was a 9-point game. So I think that with the Liberty, if they're going to, be somebody you're going to bet on to win this series, you kind of have to do it right now. You could still do it in Game 5, but why wait?
Right, now would be the time, and I think, that we're kind of in lockstep with what we're expecting tonight because Liberty are favored by 5.5 or so. And, I kind of liked their chances of winning this game even before the injury news to Chelsea Gray and Kia Stokes. And you alluded to sort of the snowball effect of these games. We found that whoever is kind of winning, halftime, third quarter tends to kind of run away with it. So I haven't officially put a bet in on this yet, but I am leaning the Liberty to cover. Agree?
Yeah, I think if you're picking a winner in the series, you kind of have to pick them to cover at this point because ultimately everybody's sort of covering because these games between these two teams aren't close. And then you have the added benefit of like Chelsea Gray being out, which to me, that's the MVP of the series up until Game 3. I thought that while she doesn't have the counting stats that A'ja Wilson might, she has been the tone setter in this series and the reason that Kelsey Plum is getting these shots and Jackie Young was getting the look she was getting in games 1 and 2 and A'ja Wilson as well, not to mention her, was because of Chelsea Gray and also being the spirit for that team defensively. It's a huge loss. It's not just losing 14 points and 11 assists or potentially 20 points and 6 assists. It's everything that she brings on both ends of the floor. So I think if you're betting the Liberty, yeah, you have to bet them to cover, which I have. And, hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me after saying that. But I think if you're picking a team to win, just based on the history of now an 8-game sample size between these two, 5 during the season, including 1 Commissioner's Cup, and then these first 3 in the finals, yeah, you have to bet on the winner to cover because the winner just does.
Yeah, and obviously Chelsea Gray, a big factor. Let's talk about props. That's kind of your specialty. So where are you looking tonight based on everything we know, including these injury absences?
Yeah, so I think Jackie Young is somebody you have to look at in terms of who's going to fill that void offensively that Chelsea Gray is going to, sort of leave. And Kelsey Plum is going to be the point guard now. I think she's going to be the one handling the ball, and Jackie Young is going to try to get open off of screens, create some looks from the perimeter, largely from the perimeter. And because the Aces are a thin team, we're expecting 40-minute games from potentially Jackie Young and Asia Wilson and Kelsey Plum, and also a lot of Alicia Clark, and so on and so forth. So I think Jackie Young over 19.5 points. It's somewhere like in the even money range, and we'll see where it is by tip-off. I don't think that's going to change that much. And then beyond that, we have Sabrina Ionescu, who 15 plus points. I looked at it, saw it at plus 108, and was like, why not? She hasn't done that in 4 games. But I think this is a good buy low spot for her, because now Chelsea Gray is somebody you won't have to worry about on the other end of the floor. There's going to be more openings for her, for Breanna Stewart, for everyone else on offense, but particularly those two, and Benijah Laney as well, because she's kind of hasn't been herself, or at least her recent self in the finals so far. And then Jonquel Jones over 10.5 rebounds. She hasn't gotten more than 10 rebounds in her last few games, but was on a tear before that, which is something I mentioned in the props piece, because I just think that she is going to be able to just destroy the lane today. I went over on points last time. I think she could go over on points again. That's either 16.5 or 17.5 right now, but I like the rebounds at over 10.5 without Kia Stokes being there.
Yeah, I believe the last game was the first one we didn't see Jonquel Jones get a double-double throughout the entirety of these playoffs. And part of the reason why was she was out on the perimeter. She made 4 threes, which is nice, but I wouldn't necessarily expect that to happen again. So I agree with you there on the rebounds. And then the other one that really jumped out to me was Jackie Young, because she only had 8 points in the last game here in New York, which is not, characteristic of her. She did really, really well in the first 2 games. I could easily see her bouncing back and also having to carry some more of that load with especially Chelsea Gray out. All right, Bryan, thank you so much for joining the show. And by the way, for more, find his article up now on Action Network. We appreciate you joining.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, you can easily reference by following green.daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. That's going to do it for the show. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app.